Let me just begin by saying what a privilege it is to be here today. Particularly, as Jacques has said, we are living in an era where freedom is not really being championed anywhere near enough. So we stand at a crossroads where each minute, each hour, each day, making choices. We choose the thoughts we allow ourselves to think, the passions we allow ourselves to feel, and the actions we allow ourselves to perform. Each choice is made in the context of whatever value system we have selected to govern our lives. In selecting that value system, we are, in a very real way, making the most important choice that we will ever make. Ladies and gentlemen, those are the words of one of the founding fathers of the United States, the distinguished Benjamin Franklin. And of course, I think sometimes we need to remember that freedom is the product of our value system. So 30 years ago, we witnessed a watershed moment in our shared history, an epoch-making moment of what seemed to be the ultimate triumph of our values after a century of conflict. After 2 world wars, a Cold War and proxy wars, it seemed that our Western values had succeeded. I think most of us will remember where we were when we saw those television images beamed into our homes of the extraordinary scenes of East Germany literally breaking down parts of the Berlin Wall with their own hands, defying the oppressive organs of the state to reach out to a new beginning, a brighter and freer future. We witnessed the very real physical manifestation of new freedom. We celebrated with them, we cheered with them, some of us even sang with them as well. But 30 years on, after we thought we'd seen the victory for freedom, the world has changed, with freedom, our values once again under threat. So surely we must now ask ourselves this question: why are our democratic, our economic and political freedoms so undervalued by a generation of political leaders who have simply failed to fight for them? 1989 was a time of tremendous optimism about the future. The Cold War ended in a flash, despite the decades of political and economic oppression. Expectations, of course, were high, as the old Eastern Bloc was embraced and efforts were made to welcome them into the Western value system. Of course, back then, our political leaders stood as giants. Mrs. Thatcher, Ronald Reagan were steadfast and united in their belief in freedom as they confronted the evils of socialism and communism. They confronted the very forces that crushed the individual freedom and liberty. They understood what freedom meant to individuals, to our democracy and to society, and they defended the cause of freedom and liberty. Yet 3 decades later, we're not in the broad sunlit uplands, which we had hoped. Instead, we are in a troubled Europe, in a troubled world, witnessing the polarisation in our politics, the rise of extreme political movements, and, to be specific, the tragic decline at home of one of the greatest political value systems in the Western world, that system of conservatism. In short, we are less confident about our future than in any time in decades before, because political consensus has, let's be frank, generated a generation of political office holders rather than the champions of the value system that govern our lives. But of course, it doesn't have to be this way. And as a nation, we have weathered difficult times and emerged stronger and more prosperous. But we will not achieve that renaissance in our democracy and our prosperity with uninspiring leadership and unimaginative policies. Which brings me to the political decline that we have been witnessing. For many observers, life in my party, the Conservative Party, simply looks like some kind of debate over our relationship with the European Union. Now, I'm not breaking any new news when I say there might be some truth in this, but actually the reality is it is much more about a yes or a no to Brussels. What we are seeing in the Conservative Party is a fight for the survival of conservatism, a contest between those who believe that our purpose is to be more prescriptive, more controlling, and those who believe that our party, the greatest, most successful political party in the Western world, should promote the cause of freedom and liberty. Conservative values, beliefs and principles touch upon the fundamental struggle for the soul of the Conservative Party, between those who support that statist, more interventionist, more controlling approach to the soulless managerial decline, versus, of course, the energy, the dynamic innovation, the entrepreneurial policies advanced by the likes of Margaret Thatcher under successive Conservative governments, which naturally unleashed our country's potential. Now, at the heart of this emerging debate is a simple question. How do we best govern ourselves so that we can be prosperous and free? So for me, the answer is a simple one. We need to stand on the side of freedom and reject the politics and the political approach that restricts and limits our liberty. We must never forget that our rich heritage as political conservatives and economic liberals was bequeathed to us by the great thinkers of freedoms and markets, from Adam Smith to Edward Burke to Milton Friedman. Yet, of course, it's simply not good enough anymore, as we've seen from our current political masters, for them to play the rhetoric that free markets and personal choice, of course, is good, it's the best way, without, of course, acting upon it with some conviction and belief. So that is why Jack, Matt and the team here at 1828, the work that you do, is absolutely vital to that cause. And as champions of the markets and freedom, of course we've got to have the courage of our conviction to be advocates of that transformational impact that those principles can have upon society, upon people, communities, and of course on our freedoms. And it seems to be that my party has forgotten, of course, it was Margaret Thatcher who would reach into her famous handbag and produce a copy of Hayek's Constitution of Liberty and declare, this is what we believe. We believe in the power of free markets, free enterprise and personal liberty for long-term prosperity. We believe that society is built from the bottom and not top-down, a society where people have the freedom to make key personal choices themselves. We believe that people are the best judge of how their money should be spent. And of course, within that framework, the role of government is to provide economic stability and a civil environment to allow services and communities to thrive and grow. Now, for me, this means one thing. It is now time for a new generation of political leaders to effectively take back control and deliver policies that promote the hard-fought freedoms we witnessed 30 years ago and make them relevant to today. That means a new generation of political leaders that trusts and believes in people and enterprise, and of course, my friends, in our great nation. A new generation of political leaders that champions the great liberating forces of freedom, capitalism and democracy, that supports the power and ingenuity of our entrepreneurs, the very people who create jobs and wealth upon which our shared prosperity depends upon. Open and free markets is, of course, what delivers the increases in revenue vital to our public services, and not that regressive approach of more taxes, higher taxes. Tax-heavy, centralised socialism. Of course, that is often superficially attractive principle, particularly to politicians, but never works in practice. And I think some of us may agree, I hope most of us agree in this room, the last thing our country needs is a Corbyn government and the creation of this version of Caracas upon Thames. But it is also true for those of us who champion freedom and capitalism with conviction and understanding that we have a responsibility as well to address the challenges that markets can create. You know, in my generation, we've seen complacency, corporate scandals, the hardships that follow the cycle of boom and bust, mainly led by Labour governments, and those who act with pure greed, destroying confidence in capitalism, which just fuels the left. Our political opponents, of course, love to talk down our beliefs by highlighting such distrust, but they never, of course, speak about the real benefits, and they themselves fail to acknowledge that their own preferred system of socialism delivers injustices and inequalities, and we don't need to look too far around the world to see those inequalities in action today. So to defend capitalism and freedom, we must resolve to make it work and stand up for it. For if we can use this approach to address some of the biggest challenges our society faces today, the housing crisis and affordability, the changing nature of the world of work, and of course our demographic challenges, we can be remembered as the generation, like that generation 30 years ago, that transformed our country for the better, and in doing so, reformed but brought more confidence back to the system of political and economic freedoms. Now, this really brings me to the very essence of conservative values and how we can support this approach, because history teaches us that economic and political freedoms go hand in hand. Thatcherite conservatives like myself believe in freedom and free markets, not out of ideology, but because freeing people from control of the state delivers for them, their families, more wealth, more jobs, more opportunities. We believe in care and compassion, not just because, of course, it makes good economic sense to look after those who can't look after themselves, but because it is the ultimate test of our civility and humanity. And it is, of course, a fact that when people are free to choose, they choose freedom. We see across the world again and again and again, where democracy and free markets work, people have the freedom to succeed. The time has come for my party, the Conservative Party, to rediscover our values and our self-confidence, to go to the country and explain why the Conservative way is the right way and the only way. Because freedom and choice encourages people to pursue their dreams. It enables people to start their own businesses, like my parents did, to provide for themselves and their community, but also to foster a culture of ambition, aspiration and opportunity. Our political and economic freedoms should position government support for society, founded upon communities, to support people, family and enterprises, and not act as a replacement of it. Now, every generation has a chance to shape history. Just as at the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall 30 years ago, it gave political leaders the chance to almost reset politics, press that reset button. There is the chance to do that again. We have Brexit as an opportunity to shape and create a truly global Britain. A Britain comfortable within itself, encouraging individual freedom and enterprise, trading with the world outside. And I think this is especially true regarding trade, the crown jewel in the Brexit negotiations. It is the essence of our economic freedom to choose with whom we want to trade and under what conditions. It is an unnatural position for a great trading nation like ours, with a long free trade history, to be huddled behind 10,651 EU tariffs created by Brussels out of the fear of competition. As we know, during the negotiations, the EU offered a free trade arrangement, similar to the one negotiated with Canada. We should have grabbed it with both hands and then set about negotiating our own trade deals around the world, because we're British and we have no fear of the open seas, and we are prepared to take risks, and also embrace opportunity. Now, to me, it's a combination of the nation state and the rigorous programme of economic and political freedoms that will serve Britain best in the decades ahead. Just as we should reject the freedom-destroying nanny state control of socialism, we should reject the oppressive controls and restrictions of EU membership. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, it is simply not enough to know that we are right and for politicians to just say that they would go along with this but do little to deliver it. We have to deliver. And it is a tragedy that a generation of politicians have failed to advance our freedoms. In order to secure our political and economic freedoms for the next generation, we must look to the future with renewed leadership, and not just talk about freedom, but have the authentic conviction, determination and desire to deliver the economic and political freedoms our country needs to succeed. By promoting economic freedom for families and for businesses, having an unequivocal belief in the creators of wealth, adhering to the spirit of optimism, and of course, the ability to apply conservative values and beliefs to policies, we can become the champions of economic and political freedoms and be unapologetic about the value of markets and free enterprise. As we witnessed 30 years ago, a generation of political giants confronted the very forces that crushed individual freedom and liberty. The time has come once again to reignite the flame of liberty, to seek to lift Britain's standing in the world and put freedom at the forefront of political and public life. If we choose to fight for these clear principles, we can sweep away the complacency which has seen our country sleepwalking to a decade of slower growth, higher taxes, and less individual freedom. The time to act is now, because our future freedom absolutely depends upon it. Thank you.